This is episode number 75 with Matt Miller. Hello everyone, I'm Julian Placino, and welcome to the Pathways to Success podcast, where I interview experts on leadership, personal development, business, health and fitness, and many other topics to help you find your unique pathway to success. Having a deep recruiting background, I leverage my ability to attract top performers and conduct in-depth interviews to uncover the secrets to success from a highly diverse group of experts, then share these lessons to help you find your unique pathway to success. Thanks for tuning in, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you soon on the Pathways to Success. This episode is brought to you by CompeteEveryday.com, a global lifestyle brand that provides competitors everywhere the positive motivation to take on their greatest obstacles and compete for their life. Now, this is a very unique sponsor because when you look at their products, they're kind of this perfect blend of motivational messaging and high-quality fitness and lifestyle apparel. So they have t-shirts, hoodies, joggers, tank tops, shorts for men and women that display inspiring messaging like be a difference maker, beat yesterday, raise the bar, end on empty. And my personal favorite, compete hard, dig deep, kick ass, repeat. And there's even some funny ones like their Do Not Judge Me tee, where the O is in the shape of a donut, because Jake Thompson, the owner of Compete, has a fascination with donuts. So there's something here for everyone. I highly encourage you to check them out. I'm going to spell this out for you. That's CompeteEveryday.com, CompeteEveryday.com. And if you use the code Julian, that's Julian, my name, you get 10% off your order. So make sure to check them out at CompeteEveryday.com today. What's happening, everyone? And thanks for tuning into this week's episode of the Pathways to Success podcast. And on the show this week, I have Matt Miller. And Matt is the founder of Spirit Vending. And the reason why I thought he was an interesting guest to bring on the podcast is because his specialty in terms of creating a passive income and starting a business is in the vending industry. And quite frankly, it's just not a business that's often talked about in terms of entrepreneurship and creating passive income, but a very valid one. And obviously, Matt has been incredibly successful doing so. And I say that because nowadays with the internet and technology, people are talking about billion-dollar acquisitions and startups that go from 0 to 100 million overnight. And that's just not Matt's story. Matt really grinded his way into success. And I think this is a great topic for people to think about when it comes to exploring business opportunities. Matt himself franchises his business and has a proven method of creating success with the vending industry. So fascinating episode, incredible guy. So make sure to tune in, take notes, and on to the interview. So welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Pathways to Success podcast. And today on the show, I have Matt Miller. And Matt is an entrepreneur and an expert in the vending and school fundraising industries. Matt spent the first 9 years of his career as an Air Force pilot before entering the private sector to work in both the medical device and advertising industries. He was a top performer in the corporate world, but his long-term desire was to be his own boss. That desire put him on a journey that has allowed him to bring his company, Spirit Vending, to the cutting edge of both the vending and school fundraising industries. Today, Spirit Vending's franchising program provides a proven and profitable system for both busy professionals and their families looking to develop secondary income streams with a limited time commitment. Matt is also the host of the School Zone podcast. So it's my pleasure to welcome the one, the only, Matt Miller. Welcome to the Pathways to Success. How are you?
Hey. Great, Julian. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, no problem. So Matt, let's kind of jump into things and introduce you to my audience. So we have kind of some context in terms of, a little bit of your journey, but tell us a little bit more about how you came to do what you're doing today.
Well, I grew up in the Chicago area, and like you said, went to the Air Force Academy, was a pilot. Got frustrated along the way, knowing that I could do better and make more money on the outside world versus basically getting promoted based on a time and service, not necessarily on performance. So I jumped off into the corporate space, did pretty well there, but very quickly learned that the rules are always changing. And in a publicly traded company, the stockholders are the number one priority, not the employees. So whenever the changes occurred, they weren't in my favor. And so I was forced in a way, Julian, to jump into entrepreneurship just to be able to provide for my family. There was a decision made when I was working in the ad space that cost us thousands upon thousands of dollars just because of some random decision my boss made. And we went from being in a fairly decent place to being in a really big hole financially. So I was doing whatever I could to make ends meet. We collected aluminum cans for a while. I sold books on Amazon long before selling on Amazon was cool. Um, and then I had a buddy along the way mention that he and his daughters had a couple of gumball machines, and that just struck a chord with me because I had read Robert Kiyosaki's book Rich Dad Poor Dad. I had bought into his whole idea about passive income, and gumballs and vending more specifically was a way that I could make income on the side without having to sacrifice the career that I was building that was, taking care of the majority of the family's living expenses. So I found my first used candy and gumball machine on eBay for like 36 bucks. It was from a guy across Houston where we lived at the time, so I didn't even have to pay for shipping. And one Saturday morning, I loaded up my two oldest kids and my 98 Honda Accord, and we drove across town to pick that machine up. And from there, I started teaching myself vending. I read a bunch of ebooks on Amazon. I found a Yahoo group along the way that I was able to glean some information from here and there, and slowly but surely started figuring it out. Fast forward about a year and a half down the road, I had about 125 locations around Houston at that point, working this just part-time on nights and weekends. And then '07 and '08 hit, the market tanked, and there weren't as many people frequenting the businesses where I had equipment. And so I was frustrated, was trying to figure out a way to kind of stabilize things. And right around that time, I had a number of young kids come selling me stuff for the local school fundraisers, just knocking on our front door. And I didn't know the kids. Their parents weren't with them. I had kids of comparable age, and I thought that was really pretty odd that they would be going door to door to strangers. And so thought maybe I could tie what I was doing in vending into school fundraising, get some kids off the street, and also potentially stabilize, ourselves financially. And that's where the whole idea of custom Spirit stickers for schools and sticker machines in schools came about. And School Spirit Vending was started October of '07. So we're coming up on a decade since we began this journey.
Wow. I'm curious, just to back up just a little bit. When you read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, and that honestly that changed my entrepreneurial destiny. Just this idea of passive income, you know what I mean? But I'm curious, did you evaluate other methods of creating passive income outside of the vending piece? And if so, what spoke to you about vending versus these other mediums?
Well, the other things that I was looking at the time, I was one of Pat Flynn's early blog readers on a smart passive income blog that eventually became a podcast, obviously, as well, that we all know. I couldn't do real estate because we couldn't even afford to buy our own house, let alone, rent houses to others.
Mm-hmm.
So that was out. I had no clue about the internet, SEO, AdWords, whatever was going on at that point in time, and had nobody that I could really reach out and learn from. And to be honest, I needed money tomorrow, not maybe a couple years down the road if I stay consistent.
So we're back. Sorry about that technical difficulty. We were jumping into why vending versus other different mediums of creating passive income.
Yeah, vending just made total sense to me because it was inexpensive, even though a gumball is a quarter and it takes a lot of gumballs in order to make a financial impact, especially where we were. I needed something that was a sure thing. And I'll never forget, I got that first machine. It was a 2-head candy and gumball machine. After about a week of door knocking, I found a local karate studio that was willing to let me set it up. I set it up with some gumballs and Skittles, I think, if I remember right. And 2 weeks later, I had to see if this thing really worked because I'd never used these machines before. My kids had never used them either. So I went by the place. It was a Thursday night. It was packed with kids doing karate classes and all. I put the key in the machine and quarters spilled out all over the place.
Huh.
And I was like, holy smokes, I found it. Within 2 months, Jillian, I had paid for that machine and had money to be able to buy another machine and then another one and then two machines and then four. And I literally cash flowed this thing from the very beginning because I didn't have any other resources.
Hmm.
We were in such a bad place financially that I actually got turned down for a payday loan at
Wow.
one point in time. And you don't need a credit rating for a payday loan. But you got to have a bank statement that doesn't show any overdrafts. And I had three overdraft charges the previous month, and they told me no. So anyway, it was the way that I saw that I could keep my career, do something on the side um, that was very inexpensive to do, and know that I was going to have immediate results that I could then take to the bank and slowly start to work my family out of the position we were in.
Interesting. Yeah, the reason why I ask why this versus other ones, I'm trying to identify who is the vending machine business industry specifically for. And it sounds like you can start this with like not a lot of cash at all. And, for me, although I'm technically a millennial, I've never really been good with technology and stuff like this. And honestly, that's what most people talk about nowadays are all kind of like the sexy businesses and apps and applications. But this is really something lo-fi that generates cash, right? I
Well,
don't.
yeah, I mean, here's what I've learned over the years, Julian.
Hmm.
Sexy does not mean real or does not mean real money. And I got over myself long ago.
Hmm.
I stopped taking myself so seriously. I stopped caring what people thought of me.
Hmm.
And once those decisions were made in my mind, it opened me and my family up to a completely different world of opportunity that most of us shut our brains off to because we have this overarching, we've got this status in our mind
Hmm.
or this persona that we have to carry around. And I've quite honestly, I've looked at the direction that everybody else is going most of my life, and I've turned around and gone the opposite way.
Hmm.
And it has paid off huge dividends for us. I was the first one in my high school in over 20 years to go to a service academy. Since then, I can't count the number that have gone and graduated and followed in my footsteps. Doing the vending thing. Of course, it's an obvious progression, right? From
Hmm.
Air Force pilot to advertising executive to vending operator. I mean, isn't that kind of what everybody does? No, I'm just kidding. But
Yeah.
it's the reality is you got to find what's going to work for you.
Mhm.
And I was looking to develop lifestyle and have control over time and money. And quite honestly, I didn't care what it was that got me there as long as it was ethical and I could sleep at night. And so the vending thing just made sense. And here we are today as a franchise with over or just shy of 100 franchisees in about 42 states. We just got started in Alaska and Hawaii and are in most of the lower 48. We should be franchising in Canada here this fall.
Mhm.
And we're in 2,500 plus schools going to 5,000 in the next couple of years with millions of customers and having raised close to $5 million dollars for education, 50 cents at a time.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
so for those that are like, yeah, whatever, vending, or they're thinking soda machines and snack machines and all that,
Mhm.
yeah, that's vending too. The challenge is the machine is thousands of dollars. And if you get a really good location, the machine capacity is so small that you've got to go back multiple times a week just to keep the machine full
Mhm.
so that you can keep making money. The beautiful thing about gumballs and candy and stickers and toys and all that is the capacity is such that service cycles are normally 45 to 60 days. So you can do this on the side without impacting your career and slowly but surely put something together. By the time I started SSV at the high point of my traditional vending business, I was making two times more there working, nights and weekends than I was full time as an ad executive working 40 plus hours a week. And of course, we've gotten way past that with SSV since then. But anyway, there's real money, guys, and there aren't a whole lot of people playing if you really go out and look.
So let's break this down into the micro. Walk me through the mechanics of one vending machine. How does that work? How do you scope a location? How do you acquire one? How does one vending machine make money?
Well, one, you find a location like I did in that karate studio. You go to Sam's Club and you get some gum and some candy and you fill it up. Um, and a typical machine, if you were to look at the census of the vending industry, which there's a periodical called Vending Times that comes out with that census every year. I think the typical machine does $12 to $15 a month. Now that's average across every location across the country. So there's a lot of locations that do significantly less. There's some that don't do as well. The beautiful thing about vending is that first off, my machine, I got it for cheap. It was, on eBay used, but within a couple months, I paid for that thing. So I had no debt. In fact, the machine was worth more than I paid for it. So I could have turned right back around and resold the equipment if I needed to. So there was virtually no risk for me whatsoever. And I just, I got that one machine and then I leveraged that money from the machine for another one and for another one. And it was a very slow and methodical process, which once again isn't sexy for most people. They want it now. They want to, generate wealth overnight, which doesn't happen in the real world. And so it took a lot of work. It took a lot of focus. It took a lot of ups and downs. It took a lot of no's. But the reality was I could build it. It was guaranteed income for the amount of money that I was investing. The return was huge for the amount of money that I was investing, and I could scale it at whatever pace I wanted. As I got bigger and as the numbers grew, I grew faster because I had more cash to put into equipment and that type of thing. But at the stage in life where we were, I didn't have any other options. I didn't have access to credit. I was tapped out financially, and so this made sense to me versus I'm going to start a web something or other and build up a following and all that and maybe someday make money. Now, don't get me wrong. Now I've got the vending business. I'm doing some stuff in the web world. I'm about actually in the next day or two going to release a brand new ebook for my School Zone podcast listeners called the Top 10 School Fundraising Ideas for 2017. And it's a resource for PTA moms and school volunteers and principals and administrators to help shorten and simplify their search for fundraising companies. So I'm now in that space, but my foundation is vending, and it's a pretty cool place to be.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And again, you mentioned that you saw the direction that everyone was going, you went the other way. It's the whole, once you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to kind of pause and reflect. And obviously you found success here. But I'm still kind of curious about the mechanics. You mentioned you buy the machine, you buy the candy. Now, in terms of placement, though, do you pay the business owner like a lease to keep it there? I mean, how does that kind of negotiation work?
There's two different types of vending, essentially. There's charity vending, and then there's a revenue share with a location. It really depends on what you're doing, what kind of equipment you're talking about, and how much money that you anticipate making in a location. But typically, a candy or a gumball machine is a charity location of some sort, meaning you partner with a local charity, a portion of the proceeds go to that charity, and the business in the interest of helping out will provide a little bit of space to place that machine. I partnered with MD Anderson's Children's Cancer Hospital for several years out in the Houston area, and a portion of all the proceeds went to them for my locations where I was just doing candy or gumballs. For the toys and the stickers and all that, that's typically where you're taking up more space and you're working out a revenue share with a location where you do all the work, you provide the equipment, you provide the product and the merchandising and all that, and then you just cut them a check, every time you come in and service type thing.
Gotcha. Okay. And you mentioned that this is a good sort of part-time thing someone can start while they're working. So I'm curious, it's not like you were still working full-time and starting this on the side. Like, how much time were you putting into this effort?
I would say to begin with, maybe, I don't know, 10 hours a week. It got to be more as I got a lot more locations that had to be serviced each month.
Hmm.
But I mean, it was minimal time. I mean, I was working full time. We're a homeschool family, so I'm a
Mm.
homeschool dad. I'm active in my church. There was a period of time there once we started SSV that I also delivered pizzas for about 20 hours a week because I needed more seed capital to grow the business
Hmm.
on top of all those other things. So I was out of balance for a while, but I was still getting good night's sleep. I was still getting a chance to spend time with my family. My kids ended up having a lot of the time they spent with me going out and doing the vending thing
Hmm.
so that we could spend time together and I could do what I needed to do. They learned some entrepreneurship along the way. We always made the time together special, and it ended up serving several purposes. Um, but I was out of balance intentionally for a short period of time, knowing that if I continued to do what I did, eventually I would get to a point where I didn't need to do all that other stuff anymore.
Hmm.
And 6.5 years ago, I quit my job. I bought my very first house. We moved about 5 hours away from where we were living in Houston to Central Texas, outside of Fort Worth. And today, we do what we want when we want. My wife and I had our 24th anniversary last weekend, and we decided to
Congrats.
take a thanks. We decided to take a 4.5 day trip and just took off and left our kids at home. They're either college or in high school at this point, and I didn't have to answer to anybody. I had one call that I had to take during that time that was scheduled before she and I planned the trip, but otherwise, business didn't stop going just because I wasn't sitting in an office somewhere.
Hmm. So I'm curious, from the time that you started this business, how long did it take for you to start to realize, like, oh my gosh, this is going to replace my income? Like, how long did it take for you to get to kind of that critical mass of like, hey, I can do this full time now?
I would say within, 18 months or so, I began to see that as a reality. I mean, I'd always kind of hoped that, but to begin with, I was literally just trying to keep our head above water financially. So at the beginning, it was just survival mode. Man, I got to get out. I got to get machines placed. I got to service so that I got enough money to make sure that the electric bill gets paid this month. But once again, I look at it like this. A vending machine is like a brick in a brick wall, and it's a brick of income. And whereas what most of us do day in and day out, we have to go back and add that brick again day after day after day, and we can never truly build a wall
Hmm.
because our income is directly related to the time that we work. With vending, one machine is a brick that represents X number of dollars to me and my family. I go out and put another machine. That's another brick. I don't have to go back and recreate that income again, and then another, and then another. And over time, you build yourself a house or you build yourself a wall that you don't have to keep going back and replacing.
Hmm.
Um, that's what excited me, and that also allowed me to see, okay, I'm making an average of X number of dollars per location. So if I'm here and I want to get to there, I just need to add Y number of additional locations, and the numbers work, and I'm where I want to be.
What would you consider
Not a
to
whole lot of
be?
guessing involved.
Yeah, no. So what would you consider to be the kind of risk associated with this kind of business? Because it seems like a pretty low overhead cost. I mean, you have the variable costs of like the candy and stuff, but once you buy the equipment, you own it. And I think you mentioned you didn't necessarily have to pay for the leasing space. So what are the other risks involved in this kind of business?
Your time.
Hmm.
Every once in a while, you'll show up at a location and they've gone out of business, and you see your equipment on the other side of the glass, and you got to reach out to the commercial real estate agent and get them to open up the location so you can get your stuff back. Some vandalism here and there every now and then, but there really isn't any.
Hmm.
Um, that's why I was so excited about it, because I was not in a place where I could take a lot of risk.
Mm.
And so vending allowed me, like I said, to get an immediate return and to do something that there wasn't a chance of all of a sudden now I'm, thousands of dollars a month in worse shape because a renter, leaves or, who knows what.
Hmm.
Um, the other beautiful thing is that if a location doesn't work out, you pick up your
And you
equipment and you
move it.
move it.
Yeah.
One of the challenges with the web world today is the fact that most people are building their platform or building their business on other people's platforms. They're building their business through with Amazon. They're building their business using Facebook ads or Facebook groups or whatever. They're building their business using Twitter or Instagram or whatever, YouTube. And all that's great, but as most of us have seen over the last few years, those companies can change the way they do things on a dime,
Right.
and there's not a thing you and I can do about it. In fact, there's not even a way that I've found that I could even reach out and communicate with somebody at Facebook, even if I wanted to. Um, so, it's yes, I could have some locations go out of business or whatever, but I pick up my machine, I take it to the location right next door, and I'm back in business. I had more control than a lot of stuff online today, and I liked that because there was less uncertainty with it.
So it sounds like, with the exception of maybe someone destroying your machine, you can't really lose money, right?
Yeah, no, not really. You'll have some product that'll go bad every now and then. A
Uh-huh.
location has a machine sitting there, and you find out that the machine has been in direct sunlight most of the day, and you got some Skittles that are melted or whatever, and
Hmm.
you throw them out, you clean out your machine, you move the machine someplace else in the location so that it's not exposed to the sun and to the heat, and you move on.
Hmm. Okay. And I don't know, I'm sorry if I'm missing this, but is it a common occurrence to pay the business owner for space in their shop?
It all depends on the type of vending that you're doing.
Got it. Okay.
Most of them, like I said, if it's just a small gumball machine, which is taking less than a square foot of space in their location,
Hmm.
in most cases, it's just a charity thing where
Hmm.
they're essentially donating the space to benefit the charity. But if it's anything bigger than that,
Ah.
normally there's a revenue share involved, and they get a portion of all the sales in exchange for providing the space, and you get a portion, obviously, because you're the one fronting for the equipment and handling all those details.
And what is a fair revenue split for that kind of engagement?
It really depends. Typically across the industry, you're looking at, 35 to 40% typically.
To the
Um,
business owner?
yeah.
Okay, 35 to 40.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Gotcha. All right. So how did you go from, like, when you started, like, getting this momentum, and you mentioned the 18 months, but how did you go from operating to franchising?
Well, I started in the schools, and once we figured out how to market to the schools, we started growing pretty quickly. And before long, I had a bunch of friends and family hearing about what I was doing and reaching out, asking to be a part of it. And so initially, we were a distributorship model with a licensing agreement. Um, we would help folks get started, kind of teach them the ropes, and then kind of let them have at it. We got to where, let's see, I guess we were about 7.5 years in or so. So this is about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago.
Hmm.
And I had hired a business coach along the way, a guy by the name of Aaron Walker. I met Aaron at a Dave Ramsey Entree Leadership Master Series event here 3.5 years ago. And I walked away from that event thinking, man, this guy is somebody I have got to spend time with, just the wisdom and business experience that he had. So I hired him as a coach. And about 3 years ago, on one of our weekly coaching calls, he says, Matt, I was doing a little research over the weekend, and do you have any idea how many schools there are out there that you're not in? He said, it's awesome what you've done in the last 7.5 years. Good for you. He said, but dude, we have got to find a way to let those schools know who you are, because that's the only thing standing in the way of you working with them. They just don't know you exist. And so I started looking into how I might go about doing that. how I might be able to afford to do some marketing and all that. And along the way, I reached out to my attorney to ask him some advice. And he got back to me about a week later and he said, Matt, I've been consulting with some other attorneys, kind of looking at the law, et cetera. He said, to be honest, especially in some of the areas where you want to grow out west, the Midwest, and the Northeast predominantly, which is we started in Texas, so most of our business was in the South. He said you really need to be a franchise because the business laws are such in those states that there's really no other way to do what you do legally within those states. So we started that process. I didn't have any money in the bank. That was the biggest, most stressful time probably in my entire business, was making that decision and then committing, the $30,000 or $40,000 towards legal and everything else that needed to be done to make it happen. But we started franchising actually, 47 months ago. So next month will be 2 years. And in the last 15 months or so, 15 to 16 months, we've added 65 franchises across the U.S. And we've struck a chord with people. There's so many professionals out there that don't want to keep all their eggs in one basket, who are looking to do something on the side. And our business school, Spirit Vending, enables them to do that, with just a couple days a month's worth of work to begin with. There's another group of people out there that want to develop passive income, and we provide an opportunity to do that. And in my opinion, a much more sure thing than a lot of the other things out there, with a lot less risk. And we are a family-based business. In fact, one of our mantras is family is our foundation. And so we encourage family involvement. And just like my kids were involved from the very beginning, helping us with a business, and they still are today, we encourage families to learn how to run a business together and not just teach entrepreneurship to mom and dad, but teach multi-generational entrepreneurship that benefits generations to come, and to give our kids a leg up to learn things that in many cases mom and dad haven't learned until much later in life. I didn't start SSV till I was 40. So, for my kids to be learning this stuff, in their elementary school years and through their teens, et cetera, has been huge for them. And I know it's been the same for a lot of the families and kids within our team.
So what exactly does someone get if they purchase a franchise?
Well, the startup cost is right now, it's just shy of $20,000. To give folks an idea, the average franchise in America today is about $150,000 to get started. So we're way, way, way on the low end of that by choice and intentionally, because we want to make this as accessible as we can to as many folks as we can. But what that gets them is their own protected territory of 200 schools. That gets them a 6-month mentorship with one of the veterans on our team, who takes them under their arm and teaches them the ropes for 6 months and helps them in their area get things started. That gets them all the product that they need, and marketing materials and all that for the first 5 schools that they set up. And it gets them the equipment for those 5 schools as well.
Wow, okay. Got it. So you have a territory, you have coaching, you have the product, and also the equipment. So they're actually already in the schools, or no?
No, they go out and they work and educate the schools and then set them up. They're purchasing the equipment from our supplier
Got it.
as part of that startup, so that they've got the initial equipment to get going.
Understood. Can you tell me about some of the success stories of the 65 franchisees?
Let's see. We've got a couple of different couples that have gotten started in the last year and a half that have added 75 to 80 schools, which is pretty fast growth. Our average growth is probably 12 to 15 schools or so. So they're crushing it, but they've got some goals and they're focused in making it happen. We've got one of the guys that was with me from the very beginning, who's in several hundred schools, And he's got, I think, 4 different route drivers now that handle his schools, to where he spends about a day a month doing what he does, and has actually leveraged the money that he makes here to start another business. And there's many others in that case. I would say about a third of the team, this is all they do today. Mm-hmm. Most of them were busy professionals previously, and see this as a way to get freedom like I did. But then there's others that are just looking for a way to make some extra money, to generate some more security. I've got one couple. They have been around with us for 6 years or so. They take a family vacation to Europe every year. They paid for their daughter's college, and they paid for their daughter's wedding, all from the money that they made from SSV. He works full time in the insurance industry, and she volunteers as a teacher at a small private school. They have no intention of stopping doing what they do, mm-hmm. but they saw this as a way to do some other things and to pay for some other things on top of their career. And still, have control of their time to do other things that they really want to do.
So can you tell me some of the characteristics of your most successful franchisees that are specific to this business?
People skills is important. Not everybody has that, or has had that really learned skill at the beginning, but we help them with that. Drive and determination, having a thick skin and the willingness to realize that not everybody's going to say yes, regardless of how ridiculously, compelling the program is. But it's one of those things. And after taking some time, most people work through that as well. Otherwise, just patience and realizing that, this is not something that you're just going to get started and, tomorrow be able to live off of. This is a several year process. But here's the thing. I looked at it and I was like, I'd rather spend, 2, 3, 4 years putting something together that I own, so that I have total control moving forward, than be controlled by somebody else 40 hours a week for the next 30 or 40 years of my life. So there's a trade-off in everything. And, most people are doing extremely well in their career, but just looking to do something different, or looking to make an impact in their community within the schools, which is an added benefit of what we do.
Gotcha. Well, Matt, what else? One of the reasons why I thought your story and your background was so interesting is that, because you're right, no one really talks about vending as a passive income source. You look at all the Facebook ads, it's always make a lifestyle business from behind your laptop, or do real estate or something like that, right? So yeah. I guess close us out with anything else you think people should know about the vending industry that might help kind of sway them one way or another.
I would just tell them, listen, guys, don't take yourself so seriously. You're not living your life for your buddies or your coworkers. You're living it for you. And you need to do what is going to work and what makes sense for you and your family. I started out with gumball machines. There's many other types of vending out there that people have been wildly successful in as well. So you don't necessarily have to follow the path that I did and still be in vending, but it's what worked for me and worked with our situation at the time. But it's real. We've raised almost $5 million for education in the last decade, 50 cents at a time. That's a pretty big number, selling stickers. And most people don't even look at stickers as a real business, let alone vending. So I encourage you to check it out. I wrote a short ebook, Julian, called Live Your Dreams, the Top 10 Reasons Why You Need to Own a Vending Business. Okay. And I share some insights about my experience in vending and why it's worth taking a look. Your audience can go to ssvbusiness.com/pathways and download that for free. If they want to talk about the franchise, I'd love to start a dialogue there as well. But otherwise, I hope that the ebook at least gives them some more insider information and inspires them to look into the vending industry, because, like you said, it's overlooked, and there's a lot of opportunity there.
I love it. I love it. And we'll make sure to plug all of your contact information in the show notes. So how else can we connect with you and support you? I know you have a podcast. Tell us about that. How else can we find you and learn more about you, Matt?
Yeah, a couple other things. First off, you mentioned the podcast. It's called School Zone, the School Fundraising Ideas Podcast, and it's at schoolzonepodcast.com. That is geared towards administrators, educators, and volunteers in the school space who are looking to simplify their search for the next fundraisers that they're going to run with their school. I've interviewed approaching 100 companies in the last couple of years. Some really, really, really cool opportunities there. One lady is an example, or one company is called Readathon. They instead of doing like a bike-a-thon or a walk-a-thon, it's a readathon, and it encourages kids to read while raising money. I absolutely love what they're putting together. There's another company I talked to that encourages kids to exercise and to stay active called 100 Mile Club. And it's essentially getting kids to run 100 miles within a year. Kara Lubin, who founded it, was a very good friend of John Wooten, the NCAA basketball great at UCLA. And she's got a really, really cool story and a really neat company that they've put together to help and support schools. And then finally, Julian, I started a comic book company here 3 years ago. Wow. Because I was inspired to encourage kids to read with comic books, because I was inspired to read as a kid reading comics. And I looked out at the landscape and I realized that a lot of the stuff out there today is more adult themed and that type of thing. So I hired a couple of young guys from Baylor University who had just graduated. One was an illustrator and one is a writer. And we started a comic book series called Marlin and Percy. And they're a couple of apes that want to be superheroes. We were just picked up by Morgan James Publishing, and we'll be being published here within the next year. And some of that stuff can be found at marlinandpercy.com or on Amazon today.
Well, that is awesome. And wow. Well, Matt, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We'll definitely make sure to share all of your information here. You definitely piqued my interest in this, and specifically, I think this could be a really good business for my brother, actually. So thank you very much for sharing all this information here. And thank you all again for tuning in to another episode of the Pathways to Success podcast. As always, make sure to subscribe to the show so you can hear future episodes, and we'll see you next week on the next episode of the Pathways to Success.